You hear me okay? Yeah. Imagine for a moment that holiness isn't something that's found in some far off mountain or ancient temple, but it's to be found in the small daily decisions that you make. What you say, what you eat, how you restrain your anger or your desire. The concept of holiness in the Torah isn't just for prophets or priests, it's really for anyone, meaning anyone willing to live with purpose, with boundaries, with a type of sacred restraint. In Parashat Shemini, we're given a glimpse into this way of life. And remarkably, this path is open not only to the Jewish people, but to anyone who takes the journey of a Noahide, one who seeks to walk with God through the universal truth that we find in the Torah. And today, I want to show you how the seven Noahide laws, these core ethical principles that have been given to all of humanity, aren't just a legal code. They are a ladder, a spiritual map. And every step on that map is a choice to live with Kedusha, with holiness, through the power of restraint. But what is holiness? How are we supposed to understand that concept? We understand the word in English, but what does it mean in Torah terms? In Leviticus chapter 11, after we see a long list of dietary laws that Jews are supposed to observe, the Torah declares, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." This is chapter 11, verse 45. But what does that mean? What does it mean to be holy? The word Kedusha in Hebrew comes from the root letters Kaf, Daled, and Shin. Kadesh, which means to set apart. Holiness is not just about piety or mysticism. It's about making distinctions between the pure and the impure. You'll see many different phrases in the Torah with the word kadosh, such as Am Kadosh, a holy people, such as Kiddushin, which is what we refer to betrothal as, such as Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land. Why do these terms have Kedusha? Why do they have Kadosh attached to them? Because these are things that are set apart. They are unique. They're distinct from the rest of the world, from the rest of the people, from the rest of humanity. Meaning to say that when a person is mekadesh, a woman in Jewish law, when he offers her kiddush, when he betroths her, he separates her to himself from the rest of all the potential suitors she might have. It's about making distinctions between the pure and the impure, distinctions between the ethical and the unethical, the sacred and the profane. This entire Parashat Shemini, is about boundaries. Not everything can be brought into the temple. Not every animal can be eaten. Not every fire is acceptable, as Nadab and Abihu tragically discover in the beginning of the parasha. Holiness means limits, and limits in our culture of excess are really revolutionary. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in Mesilat Yesharim writes, Kedusha begins with separation and ends with clinging to God. In other words, we sanctify ourselves first by drawing a line and then using that space to rise higher, to grow spiritually. Let's walk through each of the 7 Noahide laws and see how each one is not only a moral commandment, but an act of spiritual refinement. It's a move towards holiness. First, of course, is the prohibition of idolatry, which also can teach us something about the restraint of the mind. Idolatry isn't just about golden calves or statues. It's about substituting truth for something easier. It's the human impulse to worship what we can see or control or understand, even if it's false. To reject idolatry is to say, I will not reduce the infinite. I will not reduce Hashem to something I can dominate. I'll let God be God. That's a restraint of the ego. And it's the first step towards spiritual clarity. We see the Baal Tanya explains in the Igeret HaKodesh, he says the following, he says, the entire foundation of faith is bittul, the nullification of the self before the infinite light. Now, we see very often these days New Age practitioners, New Age influencers who make this interesting journey. There's a number of examples of it. I don't want to name names, but there are a number of examples of it, who make this interesting transition from spiritual eclecticism, which we find in the world of New Age, to ethical monotheism after a long personal journey of searching. Several people very publicly have given up popular mystical fads that promised power and turned toward lives of service, of truth, and of humility. They've chosen the quiet discipline of prayer over self-styled divinity. Now, we see also some celebrities today have become objects of worship. And people literally describe certain pop stars as their religion. Now, at first glance, it might seem harmless, but it reflects a deep spiritual hunger being filled by human image instead of Hashem. It's a problem. It's something that we see all over the place. Now, this leads us into the prohibition of blasphemy, which is a form of restraint of the tongue. Speech creates. We know this from the act of creation itself, because Hashem brought the world into existence with 10 utterances. With speech, we bless, we curse, we shape the world, and we shape our own worlds. The Torah takes words very seriously. There's a lot of laws that are related to speech, not just the laws of Lashon Hara, laws concerning oaths, laws concerning Nidarim. To blaspheme is not just to speak harshly. It's not just to say something offensive. Remember that everything in Torah has a technical and legal definition. Blasphemy in Torah means to curse or to degrade the name of God himself. In fact, our sages refer to this act as Birkat Hashem, blessing Hashem, blessing God. They're using euphemistic language because they don't want to utter the word curse in the same sentence. And it's really an act of spiritual vandalism. To guard your tongue in this way is to recognize that the divine is not casual. God's name represents the ultimate reality and needs to be treated with awe. Recently, I heard about a Christian police officer in the American Midwest who explained in an interview that he never utters the phrase, "oh my God," out of habit. And he gently asks his children to say, "oh my goodness," instead. Not out of fanaticism, just out of reverence. If you wouldn't say the president's name without thinking, he said, no, I don't know about that, but how much more the name of the Creator? It's interesting. People are sensitive to these things. Now, while most people aren't literally cursing God, we see God's name used constantly in pop culture and social media as an expletive or in irreverent humor, often without a second thought. And even worse are trends where divine names are used in mock rituals or lyrics. What happens then is that the sacred becomes a joke. And that's also a form of spiritual erosion. So it's something that we really want to draw the line there. Because the way we communicate around faith has a huge impact on our own. One thing that we'll discover on the path of Torah is that just like a person needs to take steps to maintain their physical health, we also have to take steps to guard our spiritual health. And this is a good place to start. We all know about the prohibition of murder, and that's a restraint of power. Every human being bears the image of God. To take a life is to erase that image. But the prohibition isn't just about literal killing. There are instances where killing is not only permitted, but it's prescribed, such as in capital cases in Beit Din, or in self-defense wars, or in self-defense in general. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about murder. We're talking about where that did not have to happen. But it's also about how we treat others who are weaker and who are more vulnerable. Restraint, in the larger sense, means refusing to use power to destroy even when we can. It's a name I hadn't seen in a long time, Malala Yousafzai, who was shot for advocating for girls' education. She didn't respond with hate or vengeance. Instead, she used her platform to promote peace, dignity, and education for all. And she's a global model of moral courage without violence. I heard that there's a TV show called The Bear, which portrays a chef learning to treat his kitchen staff with dignity instead of rage. In other words, modeling the restraint of power even in high stress settings. You know, it's not enough to just look for what people are doing wrong. We want to look for what people are doing right also, because there are good role models all over the place. There's a prohibition of adultery, or more broadly, of sexual immorality. And this relates to the restraint of desire. Now, contrary to what a lot of people coming from other religious traditions might believe, desire is holy. But it's like fire. There are so many songs that rhyme fire and desire. But like fire, it has to be contained. Fire, when it's in a glass lantern, provides light. When it's in the fireplace, it provides warmth. When it's out of any of these containers, it can be very destructive. The Torah prohibits certain relationships because they confuse boundaries and because they destroy trust. This law says not every love is holy, and not every passion leads to life. Choosing restraint in this area is not a form of repression, it's elevation. Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler writes in Michtav Me'Eliyahu, true love is not the desire to receive, but the will to give. Restraint is what preserves the space in which love can flourish. A married couple who had struggled with infidelity in the past shared in a recovery group how they now observe intentional digital boundaries. They don't go to bed with phones in their hands. They each have passwords, but they practice transparency. By the way, anybody who wants to make sure that their life is clean in this area should create a password with their spouse where each one knows one half of it. It's not fear, says the wife. It's love in the form of walls that protect something sacred. Now, I mean, we of course see scandals in the entertainment industry, such as the hashtag #MeToo revelations. These things highlight how unrestrained desire, especially in positions of power, leads to deep exploitation and harm. So we have to be very, very careful to make sure that love is in its proper place and that desire is in its proper place. The prohibition of theft is a restraint of possession. Theft isn't just taking someone's wallet. It's taking what isn't yours in the most general sense. Time, credit, dignity. Holiness says what you have is enough. What is not yours is off limits. That's a boundary that dignifies both you and the other. Amazingly, in Japan, after the tsunami in 2011, residents found valuables, cash, gold, electronics, on the steps of ruined police stations. Many of these people had lost everything themselves. One elderly man said, "What's not mine cannot heal me." Is that a beautiful idea? Unfortunately, we also have plagiarism scandals like those involving music artists copying beats without credit or influencers copying content. And these demonstrate how fame can tempt people to steal ideas and call them their own, running after likes and subscribes. Shouldn't force a person into this kind of thing. Now, the prohibition of eating the limb of a living animal is a restraint of the appetite. And this seems a little strange, but it's profound. It tells us don't consume with cruelty. Don't feed yourself while another suffers. This is ethical eating. It's about not letting your appetite override your compassion. The Ger Rebbe once said, the test of a person is not what he denies himself, but what he is willing to wait for. There's a vegan YouTube cook named Papaya Mama who went viral for thanking the farmers, the truckers, and even the earth. It's like slightly outside of our comfort zone, but okay. But she thanked all of that before beginning each recipe. She teaches her 200,000 plus followers to bless the chain, not just the food. And that's something that we can think about, when we go to the grocery store. It's how much hard work went into bringing you this produce. There are documentaries like Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy that have spotlighted industries that treat animals and ecosystems with cruelty. And there are many ethical consumers choosing restraint over indulgence at this point in time. It's not to say that this world was not created for mankind and for the use of mankind. It was. And we have to, at some points, recognize the boundaries between the Torah's perspective on these things and the perspective of eco-activists and animal rights people, because it's really not the same. But there is a point of truth. There's a nakuda ta'emet in it, which is a sense of stewardship that human beings were given over this world. It's not just about exploiting it, but about taking responsibility and caring for it. And finally, we have the mitzvah of establishing courts of justice, which is a restraint of chaos. See, without justice, society collapses. And this law tells us to create systems where order, fairness, and accountability can thrive. If we zoom out, it's not just about courts, it's about creating space where truth matters, where consequences matter. Holiness can't grow in chaos. Holiness is obscured by chaos. There are people who have defended wrongfully imprisoned people who are on death row. A lot of people have ended up being handed the death penalty when they were not guilty, or being imprisoned for very lengthy sentences without being the guilty party. The opposite of poverty is not wealth. This is a quote from Brian Stevenson, who was the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. The opposite of poverty is not wealth, it's justice. It sounds a little bit Marxist to me, but you get the point. You get the point. We have to make sure not only that bad actors do not go unpunished and that those things are restrained. We also have to make sure that justice is done properly. Shows like Making a Murderer or When They See Us have sparked public conversations around justice, showing what happens when systems fail and the power of people demanding accountability. It's something that we have to think about. These 7 laws are not just don'ts. Each one is a spiritual gateway. Each act of restraint becomes a sacred act. Each boundary creates space for something higher to enter. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh taught that holiness does not dwell in noise or chaos, but in stillness, in intention, and in the quiet choice to serve the Creator through daily life. It's very important for Noahides to understand that you don't need a talis or tefillin to be holy. You need reverence, discipline, and heart. In a world like ours, which is drowning in noise, holiness begins with what we don't do. The fire we don't bring to the altar, the food we choose not to eat, the word we choose not to say. Parashat Shemini reminds us that God is found not only in thunder and in miracles, but in limits. And the Noahide laws show that even without the 613 mitzvot, every human being can ascend to a life of meaning, a life of purpose, and of sacred restraint. Be holy, for he is holy, and you are called to walk in his ways. And we should all be blessed to have clarity in order to do that.